You are listening to I Am Refocused Radio with your host, Shemaiah Reed. This show is designed to inspire you to live your purpose and regain your focus. And now, here's your host, Shemaiah Reed.
Welcome back to I Am Refocused Radio. Once again, we are here today. We have another show lineup for y'all today. We have a special guest. We have Zolal Habibi, and she is going to give us amazing insight on human rights. She has spent more than 2 decades fighting for human rights, democracy, and the freedom of Iranian people. Her journey began with a personal loss during the 1988 massacre, and she's going to share with us that story with her father. And I want to say, you are not just doing great work, but you're doing necessary work that I hope people pay close attention to in this interview. So first and foremost, I just want to cut to the chase because I could probably talk for another 10 minutes on all the work that you're doing. I just want to say to you, Zola, how you doing today?
Good, thank you. And first, please let me take a minute to say hello to all those who are tuning into the podcast today. And thank you for this opportunity to be able to share about the current situation in Iran and the human rights situation there, and why we think it's important to be discussing this issue now in a global scale. So thank you very much for the opportunity.
Yes, ma'am. Appreciate you being on. Let's go to activism. When you began with a personal tragedy, I mentioned your father in the intro, but I wanted you to kind of take the audience back because only you can give us a great story with that insight. So if you don't mind, tell us a little bit about what happened in 1988.
Well, just to give a bit of a background, my father was a prominent human rights activist and a writer, and he was active in regards to the human rights situation in Iran since 1981 when the extensive wave of executions began. In 1981, the regime started mass executions, hundreds and hundreds daily. People were being killed. Among them, you saw children as young as 13 years old being killed, to elderly mothers, to pregnant women. The regime wanted to spread fear in society to make sure that it can work on power, especially because it had only been a year and a half practically since it had, come into power, or about 2 years. So during those circumstances, my father decided to dedicate his work and his life to the human rights situation in Iran. My parents had come to the U.S. before the revolution, so they were studying here before the revolution and just ended up staying. But they decided to dedicate their lives to the cause of freedom in Iran. So I got introduced to the human rights situation in Iran as a child and was active, but I always thought that's in Iran and we're here, so we're safe. Even though what is happening in Iran is, a tragedy in itself. And then summer of 1988, the Iranian regime actually had my father killed. That summer, 30,000 people were executed within 5-6 weeks in Iran. And it was done, behind closed doors. No one heard about it. No one found out about it until months later. And, that was one of the greatest massacres perpetrated by this regime at the time. And, it really impacted not only me as a person, but I think the entirety of our country and nation, and also the future of Iran. And with that massacre, Khomeini was able to spread complete fear in society till 1999, when the first student uprisings broke out. Since 1999 till now, we have seen a few major uprisings happen in Iran. Back then, it used to be maybe once every decade, but if you look at the past decade, we've seen 4 major uprisings taking place, and but you see it evolve over time. The messaging, the methods, it is evolving, and it has reached the point that we are today in 2026 with the latest uprising, which started on December 28th, 2025 in Iran. And unfortunately, was met with brutal crackdown, and thousands of people were killed in the streets. And over 50,000 people have been arrested, detained, and unfortunately, thousands of people have been wounded, and most of them are not even able to be taken to the hospitals because the regime is actually went into the hospitals and shot people in the hospitals or had them arrested and taken away. So out of fear, the families aren't even taking them to the hospitals to get the needed medical attention that they need, because it's a matter of life and death for them. So right now we have reached a critical point, but I think this is a continuous story of the Iranian people in their quest for freedom and their fight for democracy, and so it's continuing. For me, I guess this journey, maybe it goes back to my personal experience and what happened to my dad. But even back then, even as a child, I always considered myself to be one of the lucky ones, because despite the fact that I had lost my father, I didn't have to live under those circumstances in Iran, which I knew like young girls my age at the time in Iran were suffering from. And that really made me realize how lucky I was to be able to live in a free society, in a democracy where my rights were guaranteed. And it made me value, those core rights that we have, and maybe a lot of times we just take them for granted. So it changed my perspective, I think, on a lot of things. And I remember becoming, active in regards to human rights in Iran as young as I was 12, walking down the hallways of Congress, trying to get members of Congress to sign on resolutions in regards to Iran or whatnot. But I always felt that connection that if I am living in a free society, what is my responsibility and what is my duty in face of those who are living under tyranny inside of Iran?
Once again, let's on Refocused Radio, watching us online, talking to our special guest today, Zolal Habibi. When you think about what your father stood for, are there any memories that you still hold close to your heart of him? Maybe some things that he taught you or some of his sayings. Is there anything that comes to mind?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I do have a lot of vivid memories of my father, even though I was only 7. But really, a great deal of my personality, I think, was shaped by my parents at that age. And I remember my father was very passionate when it came to freedom in Iran and speaking about it and how things would be in a free Iran. And he always told me that, it's your generation's responsibility to build a free Iran. It's our generation's responsibility to free Iran. And that is what I grew up with. And I remember he spoke with such passion about, what a great country it is that we have, what a great people we have, and the assets of this society are our people. But unfortunately, it's just in the wrong hands right now and under tyrannical rule. And so that created that bond and connection for me with the people of Iran, even though I had never seen Iran. But I think the greatest impact my dad had on my life was, the example that he set for me. I always say that my parents, they may have not been there for me, physically, through a lot of the years as a child, due to the circumstances, but they taught me what's important in life, not through their words or, in fact, they taught me through their deeds and their own actions. They taught me to put others before myself. They taught me that there are ideals in life that are worth making sacrifices for, and that you should stand by those ideals and by those principles. And at the end of the day, what's important is the impact that you leave behind in this life. So, I have outlived my father now by a few years, but the fact that to this day I meet people who were touched not only by his writing, by the fact that it wasn't just in writing. He actually set an example with, the way he lived and the fact that he dedicated his life to freedom in Iran. And so I think that they were the greatest role models for me. They taught me what's important in life through their own actions. And they taught me to, they changed my perspective on life and what is our mission and our goal in life. And for that, I'm forever grateful to them.
You think about the actions that you took over the course of your life. At 18, you stood at your own crossroads between a medical career and dedicating your life to freedom for Iran. Tell us a little bit about that period of time. And I can only imagine that was an easy decision.
As you mentioned, as I mentioned before, my parents or everyone that was around us also, they always told us that, it's your generation's responsibility to rebuild Iran. So education is a major issue for Iranian families. I don't know how many Iranians you know, but usually they tell their children you have to either become a doctor, lawyer, or engineer. Nothing below that is accepted. But so we grew up with that kind of upbringing. And so I was on my way to study medicine. I had gotten a full scholarship, and I was on my way to college in that summer, the summer of 1999. Student uprisings broke out in Iran in July. And this was the first time we were seeing nationwide uprisings after 1981. So, after practically 18 years, the next generation, which was our generation, was coming to the scene. And they were, they wanted to change. They wanted to see that change in society. And they were met with brutal crackdown. It was the first time that this was actually being televised, because it was the start of cable television and CNN and whatnot. So they were reporting on this. And so we were watching the scenes from Iran, during those days. And I remember thinking to myself, I reached a crossroad that I was like, I can't just be their witness to this situation and not do something about it. I can't just be a bystander and be watching. So I decided to change my path, because I had read an article actually a year before in a magazine that it said that there were over 20,000 Iranian doctors in the US back then. Right now it's much, much more. And I thought to myself, am I going to be one of those 20,000, or am I going to be one of those who goes and frees Iran so these 20,000 could actually go and serve their own people? And I decided to, join the Iranian resistance at that point. And it's been 26 years now that I have been a member of the Iranian resistance.
For the listeners and viewers out there who only pay attention to the headlines, you being so close to the situation, what is daily life actually looking like inside Iran today?
Well, unfortunately, the people of Iran have been living under a tyrannical rule for 47 years now. And actually, this week marks the anniversary of the 1979 revolution, a revolution that was just, and the people revolted to end monarchy, which was a classical dictatorship. But unfortunately, it was replaced by something worse, a tyrannical regime, a religious theocracy, which was put in place by Khomeini. So unfortunately, the Iranian people saw their revolution hijacked by Khomeini. And unfortunately, right now, the reality is that just in 2025, there were over 2,200 executions. Just this week, there were 99 executions carried out in Iran, just the past week that we are currently in right now. And executions continue on a daily basis, because that's the only way the regime can keep its grip on power, because it's on a very, very weak position right now. So the only way they can keep power is by spreading fear in society. On the other hand, we witness, the recent uprising was due to the collapse of Iran's economy. Unfortunately, despite being a very rich country in natural resources and from every aspect that you look at it, but people in Iran, over 60% of people in Iran are living under the line of poverty right now. And Iran has the greatest number of brain drain in the world. And unfortunately, you see in Iran people with doctorates or PhDs who are delivering pizzas right now because there are no jobs. There's no imaginable future really for people. So people have hit a dead end. And it's not only the economical aspect, but also, for instance, even when you look at, daily life. Right now, due to Iran is facing a water shortage because of Iran's nuclear program and how things have been, the dams that the IRGC has created to, reroute the water system to be able to continue those power plants and whatnot. There's a water shortage right now in Iran. We see that people don't have electricity for 2-3 hours a day. Tehran is one of the most polluted cities in the world. So air pollution is a major issue right now. So there isn't one sector or issue in Iran that you could put your finger on that has not been completely damaged by this regime. People are denied their most basic rights. The prisons are full of political prisoners. Just in these protests, over 50,000 people have been detained. And the people are just fed up with this regime. There is no imaginable future with this regime. And so they want to see change and they want to see the overthrow of the regime. And that's why you see that kind of dedication and that kind of self-sacrifice on the streets of Iran. And the rebellious youth of Iran, they have decided to take their destiny into their own hands because they've had the experience of their parents' generation and their grandparents, because the reality is that their parents have also seen nothing but this regime. But the reality is they've seen that, look, if we try to safeguard our own lives, nothing's going to change. And no one's going to hand us freedom in a silver platter. So we have to be that change. We have to make that change. And it comes with a great price. This regime is not a regime that's going to just wither away itself or just, decide to leave office. It will kill till the last moment to be able to keep its grip on power. So it's going to come with a grave price, and that means the blood of our people. But right now, the people of Iran have reached that point that they're willing to make that sacrifice because they understand that a lot of the youth, when you speak to them, they say, we're alive, but we're not living. This is not life, what we have. So we need to put an end to this cycle. And I think that right now, being in the day of communication and technology, especially the Gen Z of Iran, they're seeing how the world is living. And they're like, this is not what we have right now in Iran. This is not normal. We need to be able to put an end to it. So that's why you see that resilience and that steadfastness. But I also we see a culture of resistance that has grown in Iran, especially in the last decade, which is the result of the strategy that the Iranian resistance has pushed forward, and specifically the People's Mujahideen Organization of Iran. For the past 10 years, they have had a strategy. It's called creating resistance units inside of Iran. So through different, cities throughout the country, forming underground networks, groups of 2, 3, sometimes some of them are up to 20 people, but they work underground together and they're local, so they understand the situation, they understand the people, they know the community, and they're able to recruit and work together. And they are able to, with their activities, break through the fear and the silence, and to keep that flame of resistance alive in society. And like, for instance, in 2024, they carried out over 39,000 activities in 1 year throughout all 31 provinces of Iran. And they targeted over 3,000 centers of oppression. So that really served as like a guiding light for people inside of Iran. Like, for instance, this time when the uprisings broke out, people felt like they knew what they were supposed to do. They knew that, look, we have to, first of all, be organized on the ground. You see that in a lot of the videos that were coming out of Iran. You see a organizational structure among the protesters, even working together, grouping, regrouping, and trying to organize. You see that their defiance and the fact that they actually try to, for instance, they're on the offensive. So, like, for instance, disarming the suppressive forces, they attack the suppressive forces who have incarcerated people and releasing those who've been arrested or detained. They set up barriers or whatever to try to protect one another, and they understand that, look, when they target us individually, we're outnumbered by them. But once we are united and standing together, they don't have that power. And so we actually witnessed in the first week of January that there were actual cities that were liberated by the people because of this organizational structure. And that was the red flag for the regime. And they knew, like, if this continues for another few days, we're going to see our downfall. So that's when they disconnected all the communication lines, internet, phone lines, text, everything. And they started, the mass killings on the streets. And unfortunately, thousands and thousands of people were killed. Among them right now, we see from the names that we have been able to verify, because there was a 19-day communication blackout, really. So, and right now it's very trickled, the connectivity with Iran. But from the information that we have been able to obtain and verify, we've obtained over 2,500 names so far. You see a lot of them are teenagers who've been killed. We saw, bodies of people who had been actually killed in the hospitals. So people who were wounded, the regime actually raided hospitals and had patients killed on the beds, hospital beds, and had a lot of the doctors and nurses who were attending to them arrested for doing so. So the reality is that, unfortunately, we've witnessed the regime commit war crimes and crimes against humanity just in the first month of January of 2026. But unfortunately, there hasn't been the international reaction that's needed to hold them accountable for these crimes that they're perpetrating. But what's important is that despite all of the bloodshed, the messages that we are receiving from Iran is we're continuing. This hasn't stopped. And we understand that this is the final push. We have to continue this, and we're not going to let all of those who have lost their lives for it to be in vain. And we're going to continue this path. And what's important is, I think this generation, they really know what they don't want, but they also know what they want. They want to move forward to a secular democratic republic in Iran. So people's sovereignty, not to have, a religious theocracy that we have, of course, but also not another form of tyranny, be it like the Shah or monarchy or whatnot. They want to move forward in the 21st century and to be able to have, a true democratic system, a republic where, there's elections, where it's people's sovereignty, that people can decide the path, forward for our country. And after 100 years of, living under different dictatorships, they really want to move forward. And I also think it's really important for like a American audience to understand this too, because the people of Iran, in fact, they keep on saying one thing: there is a third option on Iran. This has been reiterated by Mrs. Rajabi. She's the president-elect of the Iranian resistance, not only today, but for the past 20 years. That, look, the solution to Iran is not either war or appeasement. It's supporting the Iranian people to bring about that change. And I think that's very key. That's very important. Because foreign intervention, unfortunately, is not going to lead to a democracy in Iran. First of all, for those who might understand the geography of Iran, the terrain, the geography. I mean, troops on the ground is like not the solution to Iran, because it's a very vast country with different terrains, different circumstances. So it's not even an option to speak about, really. The other thing is that, like, if you just remove Khamenei himself, that is not going to create regime change. It's just removing one dictator, and then the system is still there and it's intact. So that's why change has to come from the Iranian people. And the other thing is, we have this experience too, unfortunately, in Iran, because Iran is a rich country in oil and natural resources. It has always been a country of interest to many. So, like, if you look at our history, like, Reza Shah was brought in by the British, and then Mohammad Reza Pahlavi was brought in by the US. And then there was the coup d'etat against Dr. Mossadegh, who was the only democratic government that we ever had. And then 1979 revolution, when it happened, the West was worried about, a power vacuum and who's going to come up next. And it was the Cold War era. So, and Iran is bordering the former USSR, or Russia today. So it was really important for them, and because of the geopolitical role that Iran has too. And they brought in Khomeini, who was a fundamentalist. They had him transferred from Iraq, from Najaf to Paris. And after 6 months, he was brought into Iran. And so it wasn't the people's choice. Those who had actually created the revolution, they were still imprisoned when Khomeini came into power. And unfortunately, due to lack of information, people didn't really know what Khomeini stood for, because before coming into Iran, he said, well, I don't want to have anything to do with power. I'll just be a father figure for the people. And after, things get settled, I'm going to go to Qom and continue my religious studies and whatnot. But that really never happened. From the day that he came into power, he really did everything in his power to be able to hold his grip on power and to be able to actually suppress any voice of dissent in Iran. And we are where we are today. So due to that experience, the people of Iran know they want to take their destiny into their own hands and to be able to create that future that Iran deserves, which is as I said, a secular democratic republic.
Once again, this is Refocused Radio, watching us online, talking to our special guest for today, her name, Zolal Habibi. I want to say, what you're doing, if there's any way we can help, just let Refocused Radio know. And if someone's watching and listening and they feel the same way, what is the best way that we can help someone like you?
Well, for those who are watching in the US, if you want to become more active or be able to do something, there's the OIAC. It's the Organization of Iranian-American Communities. They have chapters throughout the US in 40 different states. So if you reach out to oiac.org, OIAC, you could become in contact with them, and they could connect you to the local chapters. What's important is to try to raise awareness as much as you can and inform yourself. So if you would like to learn more about the National Council of Resistance of Iran, the website is ncr-iran.org. Or if you would like to learn more about Maryam Rajabi, who is the president-elect of the Iranian resistance and she is a woman who has been leading this movement for over 30 years now, and she has really been a trailblazer in pioneering in women's empowerment, and her 10-point plan for a free Iran is really a what many have called Jeffersonian. So it's something that's really interesting to look into. You can learn more about her on MariamRajaviforChange.com. And for those who might be in Canada or Europe or Australia or anywhere else, you could reach out to iranfreedom.org, and they could put you in contact with local chapters in your own country to be able to be active with them. We do have a lot of different activities, both in the US and in other countries. So please reach out, and we would be more than happy to have you with us in these very difficult times. But it's also a time that people have a lot of hope that we can bring about that's change. And in Farsi, we have a saying that it's always darkest before dawn. So we are at that point now. So we hope that we will be able to have a free Iran soon. And we would love to host everyone there who's watching.
Skin Let's Refocused Radio and watching us online, talking to our guest today, Zolal Habibi. What you are going to do is even greater than what you're doing in this moment. And just thinking back, what all you went through at such a young age, at a crossroads. Do I go for my medical career, or do I go and step into something that's bigger than myself? I mean, you talk about finding purpose. My last question for you would be, when you think about purpose and how that plays a role in an individual's life, what does it mean for you, and how your purpose is leaving a legacy for what you're doing?
Well, that's a good question. I think that for all of us, at the end of the day, it's really important to understand, like, what is our purpose and what are we doing with our lives? Because I think that every life is very valuable. And in fact, I think that we all have so much potential to make an impact on the society that we live in, no matter where we are or in what era we're born or raised. I think that we can all be that change we want to see in our society. So what's important is to be that person who takes the first step, or, just, it doesn't have to be a great leap, just step by step, we have to move forward and act. So I think, to have, for me, that has always been very important. Mrs. Rajavi has always taught us one thing. She always says that, what the difference between people is the choices that they make and the price that they pay for those choices that they make. So it's not someone has, extremely, extreme strengths or something like that, and someone doesn't. It just means, how much of a price am I willing to pay for that choice that I want to make, or that path that I want to follow? So I think that with that kind of dedication, we can all create a lot of change, both in our surroundings and in the society that we live in, but also we can make a major impact on, the world as a whole. And if we understand that we have that potential, I think then we can see the true potential that each person has, and we can become so much more and be able to have so much more of an effect everywhere. And so I think once we realize that hidden potential, we have a lot to give back to society, and that is something that always pushes you forward.
On that note, I will end it there. We've been talking to our special guest today, Zolal Habibi. What you just said, that was a great way to make this a full circle. If you are watching this and listening to this, do one favor. You know the drill. Share it with one person. You don't have to share with 10 or 5 or 15. Just share with one. And we greatly appreciate that. Like I always want to say to our guests, Zolal, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for having me.